Singer 111W153. This machine was in a body shop. So does this sewing machine even sew? Is it all there? So I just thought I would take you through the process. We're going to clean this up. Just see if we can get it sewing. This is just the process I go through. I get an old machine like this and I just start going through it, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. Just kind of dial it in so that it is easy to use and of course effective. The machine head itself, 1942. And that's based on this number right here. There's a website you can go to and look up on a chart for Singers. I mean, 1942. World War II was in full swing. This machine has probably the original stand, just judging from square bolt heads and the heaviness of the stand. They don't make stands with metal this thick anymore. The tabletop, I mean, I don't think the tabletop is from 1942. There is some plastic right here, so maybe that got replaced at one time. There's the old knee lifter. This machine has got a clutch motor. I doubt that's 1942. So I do believe some things have been replaced on this over the years. So here is the drawer that was in the machine. Let's kind of see what we got here. Random hole plug, thimble. Here's some needles, 135x17, size 22. So these are the needles, that's nice. There's some more needles, 135x17, more 22s. So we got some needles. Here's another set of needles. These are 22s. Bobbins. Lots of bobbins. I'm not sure they're all for this machine, but they probably are. Also not sure the quality of all of these. These look to be aftermarket. Sometimes those are okay, sometimes not so okay. So we'll check that out. Whoa, check out this upholstery needle. That thing is big. Wow. That's cool. There's a straight one. Oh, this is a double-ended one. There's an eye here, there's a point here, and a point here. Wow, cool. Another one of these curved ones, a little smaller than the first. What's this? Here's one. It's kind of shaped like that. And another needle. Oh, this one's broken. Okay. Well, I don't know why you would keep that. An old brush that's gunked up and no good. A bunch of razor blades. Be careful. Some upholstery, you know, what do they call these? Hog rings or something for upholstery. That checks out. Some more of these needles. A bunch of curved, lots of these curved upholstery needles. Bonus, razor blades, random screws. I don't think this bolt comes out of this machine. Alright, so that's pretty much it. The 111-153 is the triple feed sewing machine. Now, Singer didn't call it a triple feed. As far as I know, this is the original triple feed machine. Singer had a walking foot before this, the Singer 16 model. That model did not have needle feed. This one does. So this right here, everybody copied. Juki, LU563, Conso 226, machines like that. They copied this machine. If you see a machine and it's kind of got this hump right here, and then the window here, and it's through this window that you can see where your stitch length is set. So anytime you see a machine that's got the stitch length adjustment window and this hump, you know that it's a copy of the Singer 111. This machine does not have reverse. Somewhere along the line, I would say a company set this machine up to be purpose-built. These numbers are an indication as to exactly a special setup. And that setup might not exist anymore on this machine. Do you know what these numbers mean? What do the numbers on this brass tag mean? If you know, put it down in the comments. Then down here, this is the serial number. This is the number that I used to look up to see it's a 1942 machine. Then there's some more numbers right here. I don't know what those are. Do you know? Anyway, I'm just gonna use some mild soap and water and just wipe everything off. The old belt seems to be hanging in there. Right here is the stitch length indicator. We can clean that up. Oh yeah, that's shining right up. There's a dark spot here. I think this might be saying that this got painted and this dark spot here was right in the window when they painted it. So, yeah, definitely got painted somewhere along the line, and they didn't take the time to tape that off. So, not something I think that a body shop would do necessarily, but who knows? The guy I bought it from said that the shop that he worked in had bought it before he was even there, back in the 90s. So even in the 90s, this machine would have been 50 years old. Is that right? 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90? Yeah. 50 back in the 90s. So the years of sitting in the body shop have not been kind to this machine. So the cleaning that I did is, well, it needs to be a little deeper. But let's get this threaded up and see if it'll sew first before we go any farther. I don't know if this even works or not. I would like to just check it out and see if it sews, and if not, why not? And then once we can see if the hook will pick up thread or not, we'll decide what to do next. There's a little burr on the end of that needle. I'm going to go ahead and replace it. I got a bunch right here. I tell people all the time, and so I'm going to practice it here, that you can solve a lot of problems by changing your needle. And I don't know how long this needle's been on here, what kind of damage it might have on the tip, but I do think I can feel a little burr on the end of it. So I'm going to replace that needle, and I'm going to use these 135x17 size 22. Just for giggles, I plugged in the machine and this light works. So that's nice. Maybe it'll help me show this to you guys a little better. Okay, that fell right out. I'm going to pull this back so that I can see the hook and show you guys where the hook is. If you have a machine you're not familiar with and you don't have a manual, when I go to put a needle in, there's a groove and there's a scarf. Put the scarf towards the needle. So when I put this up in there, I'm going to rotate it so that the groove is on the opposite side of the hook. The groove runs the full length of this needle, and then the scarf is on the other side. And that is just a place where the hook can pass closely to the needle through that scarf relief and not hit the needle. That's the purpose of the scarf. It's just so that the tip of the hook can just pass by the needle without hitting the needle. While I'm here, let's look at this. There we go, that came out of there. I don't know about this thread, and a lot of people ask me why their thread is breaking on their machine. And if you get an old machine like this that's been in a shop since the 1990s, maybe that thread is that old. Maybe it's older. I mean, we have no way of knowing. If you have old thread, especially if it's been in the sun somewhere, that thread can be deteriorated and it's not going to perform well. It's going to break easily. So I'm just going to totally refill one of these bobbins with fresh thread. The thread I'm going to use is going to be my go-to. I use a core spun poly Tex 105. It's just a good all-around size for me and the projects I like to do and the demonstrations I like to do. That's what I'm going to put in the bobbin, and that's what I'm going to thread in the machine. Probably been a while since this thing saw any oil. Spins good. I'm going to oil this hook up a little bit. It's kind of noisy. So this was a little bit noisy for my personal taste, so I stopped loading that bobbin, and I'm going to just lube this up real good. Yeah, that sounds better. Oiling machine, that should have been step one, right? So this is this bobbin winder is set up perfectly. It loaded evenly and it kicked off right when it's full. That checks out. I got it started. I'll need to use the top thread to pull it through the tension spring. So let's thread it. Thought maybe white thread might be a little easier for you guys to see. The needle you thread towards the hook. So let's see if this hook will pick up this thread. Yes. There we are. That's great. Now I'll get this thread kind of seated by holding this bobbin and just kind of pulling it tautly through. Whoa, wow, that feed dog is super loose. I need to look at that before I go any further. It might be counterintuitive, but a really long screwdriver like this is good because you can lay that shaft against the head of the machine and get the correct angle, and then your hand is up above the machine, so the handle and your hand don't bang into stuff. Whereas if I have a little screwdriver like this, I can get the screwdriver in there, but now I can't really use it because I can't get my hand around it. So this longer screwdriver a lot of times is really what you need. So this is the feed dog, and maybe you can see this is just, super loose. Instead of just tightening this up, I'm going to take it off and clean it up and then put it back on. So this has a number on it and it says Swiss. But it does seem to match up with this throat plate. And this throat plate does say Singer. So I'm going to go ahead and run with this. I'm just going to get down in here and clean this up a little bit. When you're dealing with these small threads, just move real lightly. You don't want to force a screw. If you have to force it, you're probably cross-threaded. So now I've gone 4 or 5 turns and it's been real easy. So I know I'm good to go here. And it's getting down in there. It's getting set down in there. But I'll wait to tighten it up until I get this other one started. Got a whole set of these bits. So I'm going to use this bit right here. And that foot's in my way. I'm going to take that foot off. Does that give me enough room? It does for one, but not the other. So I'm going to take the other foot off, and I'm going to take the needle out. That's a welting foot. Alright, now I got all this stuff out of my way. I can get this in there, and you might say, well, why do you mess around with all that? Well, one, I don't want to damage these screw slots by coming in at an odd angle. And the reason we're here, remember, is this was loose in the first place. So whoever put it in didn't take the time to do this and get these, tightened up adequately. So now I can get this straight on. I can apply a fair amount of pressure to keep the bit engaged. Now that's tight. This hook race seems to be a little dirty. I'm gonna open up this hook race. There's just a little bit of lint in here, but the clearance of this ridge to ride in this track of the hook is very, very small. And it's this race that is what you, when they talk about oiling the hook, it's the race inside the hook that this ridge, spins in. So I'll get this cleaned up and put back together. And so something as small as that tiny little thread that goes the full circumference of this is enough to cause the machine to underperform or misperform. So it doesn't take a lot in a sewing machine to cause a problem. Sometimes you just got to take it apart to find something like that that's got all wound all around there. Most of the problems can just be solved by cleaning and lubricating. So in this case, the cleaning requires getting this thread off of here. I mean, these tiny screws are why I recommend getting some sort of magnifying lens for your face, because they are just so small. Can you see those? I got 2 screws balanced on the tip of my finger. So small. So magnifiers on your face help. Try to work where when you drop this, it's going to land someplace, but you're not going to lose it. I'm sorry about the camera, but there, I think I got that started now. So this back one, we'll tighten it up. The back one holds the spring on. So you just tighten it all the way up. This front one is how we set the tension. So now let's put that in there. I'll just hold it still by hand, move the machine, and see it's in effect, it's just sliding around. Sorry about that thread. In effect, it's spinning. It's held stationary while the hook rotates around it. Like this. And this little notch on there. See that notch right there? That notch slips over that little protrusion right there. And that's how it gets held in this position. Be real careful. Don't force it. You don't want to slip on these. You just booger them up, and then the next guy won't be able to get in there. All right, those are tightened up. I'm going to just put a drop of oil in there. This hook and race is all cleaned up and lubricated. And so now I can put that throat plate in there, get that needle out of the way, rotate this little arm around to where it faces the throat plate. And now when I put this throat plate in, and I can check it, it's hooked, it's sitting inside that notch. And so when I tighten this throat plate down, it's going to keep this case, this bobbin case, from spinning around. See, now when the hook spins, that case is held still. This is the case opener. Now there's an adjustment on this case opener. You need to look up in the manual what this tolerance is. So this case opener touches the tip of this 90-degree angle there. And as the machine moves, it should just tap it every once in a while and just kind of bump it back. And so it just kind of keeps it vibrating so that the thread's always got a place where it can go. I can tell right now that that opener is not touching the case at all. So I need to adjust it back this way. Right now you can see that it's touching it now, and then it comes off. And as it comes off, that's where the thread's going to go through, that little tiny gap. And then it touches the case again, and then there's a gap. Touch, gap, touch, gap. And so, of course, if you're sewing at 2,000 times a minute, that's happening 2,000 times a minute. So the tolerances are, careful. They're close. So to get this set right, basically what I want is for the opener to touch and pull this case back from its normal inclination. It wants to rotate around clockwise. And so you just want that to touch it and bump it counterclockwise enough that it'll give a place for that thread to sneak by there. And then when it comes away from it, you want to have enough gap between these two things that the thread can pass through. So I think this looks about right. So I want to set it down there. Okay, so this is kind of crashing, so I'm going to readjust this so that it opens a little more. Let's see if this thing will sew. I think before I start with the motor, I'll just make a couple of stitches by hand maybe. Yep, and I still don't know how any of my tensions are set. Probably not. Let's see what happens. The good news is this is sewing. There is an issue here. And I'll go ahead and I'll put this in here and sew this line for you. So as these feet are moving the material through, I'm seeing a paradoxical movement of the fabric. It's moving it back or forward through the machine, and then it moves it backwards. So 2 steps forward, 1 step back, kind of. I don't know if you can see that. Fabric's really shaking, so it's back and forth, back and forth. And so what's happening is this center foot is just not, it's just barely coming up. It's setting down before it's moved all the way forward, and so it's causing it to push the fabric back. I've got a nice high lift on the outside foot. That inside foot is just barely lifting up. The first thing I'm going to do is adjust the alternating height of these feet so that we don't get this kind of shaking of the material. It's real janky, but I can get that out of there. The good news is we're sewing, so that's awesome. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rock this machine to top dead center. So basically this is the point where this foot, the center foot, I want it to be at its highest location. I'm going to loosen this screw right here on the back of the machine. Alright, and that foot just fell. That's okay because we're just going to lift it right back up. And I'm going to lift it all the way up. And then tighten this. And that stays up in that position. Rotate it through. The foot comes up 1/4 of an inch or so, 3/16, and then it comes down, and the outside foot comes up about the same distance. I think I got this. It looks, just to my eye, it looks like it's about even now. Again, top dead center. See if I can make it go the, maybe too tall. I don't know. When I just pull up harder, it just, both feet come up. I've adjusted it up as much as it'll go. So let's just see what happens. Much better. Go slowly by hand. It's coming forward. There is no forward movement on the material now. Let's see if we can adjust the stitch smaller. Yeah. That's a smaller stitch. Put it up near the top. Okay, so at this point, I know that I've got a fully functional Singer 111. That's great. So now what I want to do is I'm going to set this up the way I would want it. I'm going to spend some more time cleaning up the machine, cleaning up the stand. I like a servo motor, so I'm going to put a servo motor on this. Because this head is so dirty, I'm going to take it out of the table and I want to give it a good bath. I use diesel fuel. I've used it before. I haven't had any trouble with it. I don't know if it's correct or not, but that's what I do. And because it has all the body shop dust on it, and just it was dry when I got it, diesel fuel kind of cleans and lubricates all at the same time. Clean up the table, and I'll show you how to put a servo motor on. This is a real nice table, and the stand may be older than the tabletop. It is super heavy. I like these table legs a lot. They're really nice. And then the tabletop is good too. It's super flat. This was all full of oil. Got that all cleaned out. You can see right through there where the knee-operated foot lift comes through. Pretty nice foot lift too. I like this style. It's a good one. Now that motor there got a little wet while I was cleaning the table off. Not too bad, but I'm going to let this whole thing dry out for 24 hours. Not only that, I'm going to take that motor off, so I'm just not going to plug it in. The next time somebody goes to plug it in, it'll be okay. This has got an old heavy-duty thread tree on it. That's nice. Sturdy and adjustable. Got this old kind of a light on it, which is in working condition. I'll tighten it up down there in the table. That'll make for a nice light. One of the benefits of getting an older machine are the accessories. And so I wanted to show you this bobbin winder. You know, I don't know if they make these anymore. This is a Singer part number 503780. I like the spring mechanism that's in them. It's just a real good way of providing the spring mechanism. I ran this through the parts cleaner. This stuff was a little bit rusty, but man, it cleans up pretty good. Pretty much all the features on this are the same as they are now, but you know, maybe it doesn't come across in the video, but the thing is just heavy, and it's larger, and it's just nice. Also, there's an adjustment for the brake. This is kind of like a brake, so when it kicks off, that wheel goes down against that piece of rubber and it stops it from spinning. And so in that way, you know, your bobbin won't freewheel and throw a bunch of slack everywhere. So I've even adjusted that. It was a little worn on the end, so I adjusted that so that it's got the fresh end. I just flipped it around and put the new end, or the unused end, to do the work. This is just like a cap, goes over this oil reservoir. I just pulled it out to clean it up a little bit. But yeah, really nice bobbin winder. Stuff you might not consider until you have a chance to, you know, see and use one. Then you're like, wow, that's really nice. So anyway, side benefit. Let's get this put on. Once I get the machine back on here and the belts on here, I'll be able to adjust this forward and back so that it engages when you flip it forward and also disengages when it flips back. So you have to have that belt here in place in order to make that adjustment. So I'll get that later. This light's a little janky, and all that is just on the bottom of the table there's a loose nut. So I'll tighten that up. One thing about tables is that the hinges go with the table rather than the machine. So if you have a machine that has one type of hinges in it, you can always change those hinges out for the table that you're going to put the machine into. This table uses these type of hinges, and they're nice because they spread the weight out over a large area. Whenever you set the machine back, it just kind of rotates inside that rubber. Here's an example of a common type of hinge you'll see in the back of older machines. If your machine has hinges like this in it, they go with something like this, or this, or this, and then that just hooks in there and it'll rotate on there. Notice that this part is the same, so this and this will each fit into the machine. And so I could take this one out of one machine and put this one back in the same machine. So hinges go with the table. These hinges are nice in that they have a level of shock absorption built into them. These are nice hinges. Then here we have the felts in the corners. You know, that's another style. There's rubber corners and there's felt corners. These are in real good shape and they're at a nice height for that machine that goes in here. So these are real good. So I'm just going to reuse those. This is where the kickstand goes. So when you rotate the machine back, there's like a stand here, and that keeps the machine from, you know, falling against this light, falling off the back of the table. Kickstand. This one got broke off. So here's a little piece of t-shirt. I just need a small piece because I just want to use a tiny bit of sewing machine oil. And then I'm just going to wipe down the machine and just leave the tiniest layer of sewing machine oil on top of everything. And that's going to, one, protect everything. Two, it's not going to be enough to get on anything, you know, we'll keep it thin. And three, it's going to make this black just really pop, look nice and shiny. So this is the back of the table, and right here is the clutch motor, the main part of it, and just up here you see those three shiny spots. Those are carriage bolt heads. So the motor is held to the table with three carriage bolts. We're going to need to take those carriage bolts off, and then there's some wiring associated with the control switch. So that'll come off, and the new control switch will come with the clutch motor. So I took that machine out, and now I'm going to put the table on the end to make this go a little bit easier. Right here on the arm, it's connected to the foot pedal. So you need to disconnect the foot pedal. So before I take the motor off, I'm going to take off all this wiring, which is attached with nailed on adapters. Whoever did this did a nice job. And then also that white cord is the light, and it's been wired directly to 110 inside this control box, which that's not necessarily standard. It was kind of the way they used to do it. This white cord comes from the 110 light that's mounted to the table. This is not uncommon, but you don't see it every time. Most of the time the light will be plugged into the motor. There's an outlet on the motor. I like this light and I want to keep it, so before I pull the motor off, I'm going to get into this box and disconnect the light. If you're not sure what you're doing, get an electrician. I'm going to retighten these up, and so once I pull this out now, this will all be back to original. Hey, did you see when I made this wrench roll out of an old military cot? If you'd like to see me make this, check out the link in the description. Now if you put this table upside down on its top, you won't have the issue I'm having where gravity's going to just want to pull this to the ground. But I can't put it on the top without removing everything, and because I'm lazy and a risk taker, I'm going to do it this way. Now I've got one bolt that's still hooked on. When I remove my last bolt, I'll be sure and support the motor so that it doesn't fall to the floor and break something, mainly my foot. Aha! So here is the motor, and you can see that it has wires connected to it, and the control box, and here's the hardware. Extra brushes, new mounting hardware, and there's also these rubber vibration dampeners. This is a safety guard for the pulley, and this is the clutch motor. Comes with the switch. It's all wired. You don't have to do any wiring. So this wire to the motor, and then to the switch, and the other end, you know, you plug into the wall. So when you turn it on, it goes from the wall through here into the motor. This right here is a way to adjust the tightness of the belt. So if your belt is too big or too small, you might be able to adjust this enough to take it up. If you don't, if you just can't make the belt work even with this adjustment, you can always go to a parts store, take the belt you have, compare it to a new belt that's either long enough or short enough. That's where you get a new belt. Right here where the 3 bolts go, so let's put it in. So a bolt and a dampener. This dampener goes between the motor and the table. Side benefit, these hold the bolts in place while I'm messing around with the motor. These are a lot lighter. Big washer, the lock washer, and the nut. Alright, I've got this where it's not going anywhere, but before I tighten it down, I want to make sure that I get the pulley right in line with the machine. So I'll move on to the next stuff, and we'll tighten it down after we get it adjusted. One thing I like to do when I mount my switch is make sure that it is not sticking out proud of here. So that way if something hits here, it's not going to hit this switch. Now I got my wiring all out of the way, so when the belt comes through here, it's not going to get in the belt. So now I'm just going to convert the 110 light that was wired into the control box on the clutch motor. Just going to put a plug on it. Alright, so here's the foot pedal, and this is the control arm for the motor. Some servo motors will come with this rod. This one does not. I get this one because I've got plenty of rods. You can get one that has a rod included. It's about $8 more. So, you know, just judging by this, I'm probably going to want that pedal to be right around there. So I need about this much more length so I can make an adjustment right here. You can see in here, this is the pulley of the motor. And this pulley needs to be lined up with the pulley on the sewing machine, and that is going to be lined up with this slot in the table. And the mounting bracket has slots that will shift back and forth on these mounting bolts. So that's why I waited to tighten that up. So now I'll slide this motor out. I'll also put the machine in and then put a belt on and fine tune it and then lock it down. Now you can see that I've got the pulley of the motor and the pulley of the machine lined up so that that belt travels through this slot without rubbing or touching anything. Now I can lock that down by tightening those nuts. So the belt tension needs to be correct. It doesn't have to be real tight. You certainly don't want it too tight. Then again, you don't want it too loose. If it's too loose, the belt might slip, and if it's too tight, you're going to wear out bushings and bearings. This motor can move in here, and you can see as it moves up, this belt gets a lot more loose. To tighten it, we want to move this down and tighten that belt up. So what I want to do is just move this nut down a little bit, and it doesn't need to be very tight, and I think that that is tight enough. So you can see I just barely finger tightened this, pushing it down against the belt over here. And now I'll tighten this up against that setting. Alright, that's locked in. All we need to do is plug it in, and I think we're ready to go. Now that the machine is back on and the belt is tensioned, I can go ahead and set the bobbin winder. And right here there's a gap between this wheel and the belt. And so what I want is to move it towards the belt but not touch it. So it's just touching right there. I'll just back it off a little. When it's in this position, the machine will run and it won't touch that wheel. Now when I engage it, you can see it engages the belt, and then when it disengages the belt. So it looks like this take-up spring is not adjusted correctly. Typically these aren't that critical, but this one is just not engaging at all. So this first screw that I'm adjusting, this adjusts that horn that the thread has to go around for the take-up lever to kind of lock the thread into place. You know, I don't really know what the specifics of the setting are, so I'm just going to set this right in the middle. The spring should be down here. The way you rectify that is the spring is referenced inside the slot of this screw right here. And then there's a set screw right here that you can loosen up. And now I can adjust this slotted screw. And you can see that this spring comes down. And then it comes against a stop, and so there is a slight amount of pressure here. If I continue to rotate it this way, I can increase the spring tension there. All I know to do is just put some on it and not too much. If it won't seat clear down against the stop here, that's not enough. And then there's about 1/8 of a turn, and I feel like that is enough spring tension now. And so this is the position I will tighten the set screw down. So I've set this spring tension up. And And now when I thread this part, it'll clip around that little point right there. That is way tight. Back it off a little bit. There's some vinyl upholstery material because this machine doesn't have reverse. I've talked in the past about how I don't really back tack that much even when I do have a machine with reverse. So if you'd like to hear kind of my philosophy about that, check out this card up here. So when I first started to get into sewing machines, I always wanted reverse, and you know, I still like reverse, don't get me wrong, but I've found that I don't use it all that much really. More I use it to sew backwards in certain cases than to actually back tack. So you know, it's not that I don't appreciate reverse at all, I do. But it's just not critical. And so you might be able to save a little bit of money by finding a machine that doesn't have reverse, like this. And even though it doesn't have reverse, it sews in forward every bit as good as any other machine. This machine sews real smooth. There's no play in this machine. With the servo motor, it's super quiet. It's super easy to control with the foot. Just stitch at a time or half a stitch. You know, you've got a lot of control with your foot. I don't have this servo dialed down to its slowest setting. I've actually got it on its highest setting. But the servo motor affords you better control with your foot. So you don't really need to turn it down. Ironically, because you get such good control with your foot. So let me get done sewing this last side down. And I'll kind of show you the speed I'm talking about. So I'm going to go from slow to fast without, you know, changing the setting on the motor itself. You've just got such good control with your foot, you don't need to really dial it down anymore. But if I just hammer it home, wow, that dude is fast. So you may not want that to ever happen, and I wouldn't blame you. That made some big stitches. That's incredible. I've never seen that before. Maybe it's too fast. Probably is. Probably shouldn't run that machine that fast. So I will dial it down. So I'll just touch on it again. Because it doesn't have reverse, you can easily lock your stitches in. You know, there's ways to do it by hand where you just pull a stitch out and tie it by hand. But what I see most old timers doing is you just sew 1, 2, bring your needle up, and then pull your work back to where you started. And and then take off again and finish your seam out. When you get to the other end, it's the same thing. Just pull your work back and sew a couple stitches back across where you just sewed. And now it's locked in. That'll never come out. That's what it looks like on that side. Setting the stitch length on these old machines, it might not be completely intuitive, but it is not hard. So this button right here, you'll push this down and rotate the machine, and eventually this will fall down into a detent. And then while you're operating this, you're going to look in through this window. And when you see a number in there, that's telling you how many stitches per inch the machine's going to sew. Alright, so I'm going to depress the button and begin to rotate the machine. Now you'll see a number coming by here, but this hasn't fallen into the detent, so these don't mean anything yet. Probably when I get down to 5, it's going to click in because I know that I've already set it to that. So it'll go from 5, and this indicator goes up to 32. But with the needle and thread this large, it's just going to all pile up on itself. So I'll take it up to 20 stitches per inch. That's pretty small. And then we'll kind of mess around between 20 and 5 and see what the differences are. The machine, while it's going pretty fast, the material's not moving. It's really about as small. I mean, it's too small for this thread. But with the smaller needle and thread, you know, this will do this 20. And I don't know if that is 20 per inch, but basically I've always treated these old machines that the settings are relative, and you just make them a little longer and a little shorter based on what it is that you want. So in this case, I want bigger. Let's try 11. Okay. Still small, but let's try, just come back around, and as 11 approaches, there, I click in, because that's where I left it last time. And so here's 8. It's about 6.5. Now we'll just go back to max, which indicates 5. Well, there you go. Here's an old machine rescued from a body shop that didn't use it anymore. Basically, we're just making room on their floor. I hope you kind of enjoyed seeing what a process is, and maybe it'll encourage you to go out and save one of these old machines. The Singer 111 is a classic. You can see it's still wildly capable, and don't let the fact that a machine doesn't have reverse scare you away. Backtacking is still possible with the machine that doesn't have reverse. And of course, back in the day when this was made, there were factories full of people that would do it without even thinking about it. So it's just another learned skill that you can pick up with a little practice. I'm kind of surprised how tight the mechanism is. This machine seems to work just as good as it did day one, I think. A good upholstery machine. These things are set up for medium weight projects. They won't go super thick. This one currently will probably accept about 1/4 of an inch in thickness. This bottom foot you know, is where I'm getting my 1/4 inch measurement, and you can see that the middle foot is getting above that. So it's going to step across a seam still at a 1/4 inch thickness. The Singer 111 W153, a classic. I hope you enjoyed this. Consider becoming a subscriber to my channel. Thanks a lot for watching.